Hello, and greetings from Colorado Springs. My name is Lance Kohler, and today I'd like to talk to you about maximizing your net operating income for your investment property. So I'm going to talk about two different ways used in coordination with each other to increase your net operating income. We're going to talk about a couple ways you can increase your income and a couple ways you can reduce your expenses. And then I'm going to talk about give you an example of an 18-unit complex that we managed using some of these tips and techniques. So to increase your income, first you need to reduce your vacancy rate. So there's two types of vacancies. You may have a vacant unit, which is real vacancy, or you may have economic vacancy, and that's someone who's living in a unit but not paying rent. So if you have a vacant unit, you should do a market survey, or find some comparables, find out why that unit's vacant, why you can't get a tenant in there. Is your rent above market, or is the condition of the property poor? Do you need to do some repairs or bring that up to something that's comparable in the market? That leads me to knowing your market. So you should, each time you have a lease coming to an end, whether you're going to renew that lease or if you're expecting to find a new tenant with a new lease, you should do a comparison of the market and find out what the market rent rate is for a similar unit. Here in Colorado Springs, we've seen the rental market increase year over year for the past 3 years. In some cases, in some areas of town, the rental market has increased by 10% over a year. So you may be, in effect, leaving money on the table if you're not doing a good analysis of what similar properties are renting for, properties similar to your unit. And lastly, on the increased income is a rent collection plan, or a disciplined rent collection plan. So your lease probably details when rent is due. Your lease probably also details any late fee, when rent is late, any late fees that may accrue, and what steps are taken if a tenant doesn't pay rent. And so what we recommend is a disciplined rent program. You have a policy, so stick to it. What we like to say is someone's always training someone. And so either if you're following your policy, you're training your tenants to pay rent on time. If you're not following your policy and you're allowing tenants to not pay on time, now they're actually training you to accept late rent. So to reduce expenses, a couple techniques that we like to offer. Handle repairs at lowest level. So if the tenant calls in with a request for a work order or a problem or issue at the apartment, see if you can troubleshoot with the tenant. Maybe you can go by and troubleshoot the issue yourself. Actually see what's the repair and get a better idea on what might be required. Can a maintenance man handle the repair, or do you need a specialist, which will come at a higher hourly rate? You may need a plumber or an electrician to fix the problem. We always recommend you qualify your prospective tenants. So good background screening, at least a credit score and a criminal background at a minimum. We like to confirm income because we want to make sure that the tenants can afford the property. And keep good tenants. So ideally, you've got a tenant who pays the rent on time and takes good care of the property. You want to look at keeping them in the unit because if they move out, every transition has a cost, and typically that comes with some repairs, maybe some fair wear and tear, maybe a carpet replacement, some painting, or you may have some vacant time, and so it's lost rent income. So when you find those good tenants, because you've screened them well, you want to keep them, and so offer the lease renewal or lease extension or a new lease to them. And the last technique I'll offer is to bill utilities back. Many times we take over management of a property and we find that the owner's been paying all the utilities and the tenants are not. And what we found is when you're billing the utilities back, it does two things. One, it saves the owner money because the owner is not actually using those utilities, the tenants are. So you reduce the expenses for the owner, and it also makes the tenants more accountable. Where we've seen utility bills decrease because the tenants now realize that their actions with regards to utilities, electricity or water, have a consequence with them in an increased or decreased utility bill. Now I wanted to quickly go through an example. So we took over management of an 18-unit apartment complex. When we took it over, it was 55% vacancy. That was 11% vacant units and 44% economic vacancy. So tenants that were in place that weren't paying rent. That led to almost $16,000 in delinquent rent when we took over the property. And the rent income for that property, those 18 units, was just over $10,000. So some procedures we used to turn this property around. Visible management. So we made sure we introduced ourselves to each tenant. They knew when we were at the property. They saw us making improvements. They saw us making repairs. And so seeing that we were taking care of the property, hopefully led them to take better care of the property. We also enforced the lease that was in place. We enforced quiet hours. We enforced rent payment, on-time rent payments. We enforced cleanliness in the common areas. There was an issue with towing and parking, and so we enforced the towing rules that were put forth in the lease. And again, so they saw us taking care of the property, and so they were more inclined to take care of the property, or they left because they didn't like the rules that we were now enforcing. I mentioned earlier the amount of delinquent rent. We offered each of those tenants a payment plan, gave them an opportunity to get caught up. Many of those tenants did get caught up on the rent and were able to stay in the property, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, those that couldn't, we did have to turn to evictions and collections. So 1 year later, that property is at 0% vacancy. We were able to collect 80% of the delinquent rent, and the monthly rent income for the property itself had now gone up over 18% to almost $13,000 per month. So we've gone over a couple tips and techniques for you to increase the value of your investment property. You increase your net operating income, increase your return on investment, and increase your cash flow. Hopefully you found this of value. Please feel free to reach out to any of our team members if you have a question on the market in Colorado Springs and a question on property management. And for more information, we post regularly on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts. Please follow us on the social media. So thank you for your time. Have a great day.